Hello and welcome to another video on the GCFC pod. It's a bit of a different one to usual. This one will just be talking about Tottenham Hotspur and what's currently going on at the club. With me, I've got Jack, who was featured last week, and then making his GCFC debut is Tizzy. How are you doing, boys?
Yeah, all good. Well, maybe not after that display, but yeah, just in life, doing all right.
Yeah, all good. Happy to be back on the show in quick succession, and let's get chatting.
Yeah, I wish you could be coming on under better circumstances, but we're going to first start off with the Everton versus Tottenham review. Overall thoughts, boys, on that game?
Yeah, well, I think obviously it's massively disappointing. I know it's away, and Spurs got the injuries and struggling in general, but I think those are the type of games that you want to win. I think we'd be looking at, or Spurs would be looking at that game in the calendar and thinking, if there's any game we're going to win, this is going to be one of the ones which we can go there, get a result, and try and really kickstart our season. I do kind of want to. I know it's like an easy cop out. I do want to kind of give credit to Everton. I think the way they set up was very mature from Moyes. They set up with the back four. They understood, we don't have Solanke, which would have been a great news for them. Richarlison's not fit, and we were lining up with Son in the middle, and they understand, Son, he's probably past it. He's not going to be, a dominant striker. He's supposed to be able to finish chances, which we'll talk about in a minute, but he's not going to be a guy causing chaos and really sort of putting defenders to the sword. So obviously they set up with the back four. I think they had three centre halves on the pitch with Tarkowski, Branthwaite, and O'Brien. Three massive centre halves, even though O'Brien was at right back. And I think their sort of game plan was, we're going to absolutely cram out the middle of the park. We're going to force you out wide, and if you're going to cross it, we're going to contest you in the air because we know you've got Son. So what I did notice was, O'Brien was sitting quite narrow. Four of the Everton players, so every player apart from DCL was sort of defending. So for example, Mangala, Gay, Indai, and Decore were all sort of playing very centrally, coming back, and they sort of know Spurs are going to want to keep possession and try and play through the middle, use players like Kulusevski. But I think they just said, you might outnumber us out wide. You can pass the ball out wide. That's fine. Who are you crossing to? Because they will be extremely happy to let Spurs cross it into Son, who's not going to compete with Branthwaite, Tarkowski, or O'Brien in the air. So I think Everton did a great job of packing out the middle, forcing Spurs into doing something they didn't really want to do, and crossing it into the lack of threat that Son is. I think there's a few individual things as well. I think for the first goal, obviously great sort of finish from Calvert-Lewin. Obviously, Jack mentioned last week about he's bound to score after his Bauer and run. I think he's a great finish, but the one thing that really sort of annoyed me in that was Sarr. So he picks up the ball sort of on the right hand side. He plays a sort of aimless ball across the middle of the park in the Spurs half, gets intercepted. They go on and score. And I think as a Premier League player, as he's young, but he's not. We can't give him that card anymore. He's been around for a few years. He played first team top flight football before Spurs with Metz, and I think him passing it across sort of aimlessly is something that's almost unforgivable at this level when your team is struggling with players, people playing out of position. You don't want to leave Gray one-on-one with Calvert-Lewin. So I think that pass from Sarr across, if one of my under 18s did that, I'd probably be pretty disappointed. So I think from a Premier League footballer, it's not acceptable. I think Son, we always say he's not going to give us what he sort of used to be able to give us, but can he still put away those chances if presented with them? I think he was uncharacteristically toothless in front of goal. He had a couple of chances. There was a cutback. I'm not sure. I can't remember who put in the ball, and he was pretty open in the box. He's just rolled it to Pickford. And there was a couple of chances in the first 20 minutes where he could have, given Spurs a bit of hope in that game. And, he failed to ultimately do what his job was. I think the other player I want to comment on was Dragusin. We can talk about this with transfer talk as well. We knew at the time this was a questionable transfer, not that we all get to watch the sort of Serie A, but we knew Genoa were a team that like to go long, they like to be solid defensively and sit back like a lot of teams do in Italy. And, Dragusin wasn't asked to do what Ange is asking him to do. So I think we all knew at the time that was a strange signing, and I think he's struggled. The other day he don't know if this is offensive to Eric Dyer, but he reminded me of Dyer, and I don't know if you guys would agree. I think this game reminded me of Leicester away in 2023. I think that was a few games before Conte got sacked, and me and Jack remember watching that. When someone, I think it was Ndai ran at Dragazin, absolutely does him, scores. That reminded me of Dyer defending with hands behind his back, an away from home loss against a team that you want to be beating. Rumors about training discontent and whatnot. It's a tough pill to swallow for Spurs fans, but I think Everton ultimately deserve the win, and questions have to be asked.
Yeah, and Jack, I'd like to ask you. Jake touched on the way that Everton set up, and within the first half particularly, there was a few times where they sent a long ball over the top to Calvert-Lewin, and our defenders seemed to really struggle with that, in particular Dragazin, who you'd think that him and Calvert-Lewin would be quite a fair matchup ability-wise and also strength-wise. They're two big guys, but he looked like a child out there. What did you make of our defending in general of the first half?
There was 3 down to Everton in 45 minutes is nothing short of embarrassing. And we set up with a 5, which was so strange to me. We saw that lineup come out. We thought, maybe this is Gray's chance in midfield, which on paper, I think Spurs fans are pretty excited about. But we've set up with the 5 back, and it was absolutely terrible. It reminds me of when we went 5-0 down to Newcastle in 20 minutes. He was playing 5 back all season with Conte. Stellini goes to a 4 because everyone's pressing him. Spurs have to adapt. We have to change. We go to a 4. We got ripped. We go to a 5 here. We get ripped. It's not the way we should have gone into it. I think Ange maybe felt pressured into it because people say, he's not adapting. He's not using his squad properly. And we go to the 5 and we look even worse. And Dragazin I think was tremendously poor. And the amount of times they sent over that long ball and Calvert-Lewin could control it with his feet. And then he could stand up the Spurs defenders and run at them. And then obviously Pedro Porro is nowhere to be seen. He's on holiday, fucking on right wing. And the amount of times Calvert-Lewin could just run at our goal. I was terrified of Calvert-Lewin. He's not scored in 16 games before he played against us. Which, it was just terrible. And I think Archie Gray really was made to look like a boy out there on the weekend, which is obviously not his fault. Doesn't want to be playing in that position. But the amount of positions that Spurs midfielders left him in, Spurs fullbacks left him in, he got absolutely ragdolled, and probably not the best for his confidence, but we know what he's like as a lad, and hopefully doesn't affect him too much. But as a whole, Spurs defensively again poor, really poor. I thought Kinski made a few good saves. I don't think he could do too much about the goals. I thought the Ndai finish was pretty good. The Calvert-Lewin finish was pretty good, some decent footwork. But Dragazin, as the senior player he's meant to be, probably trying to nurture Gray alongside him, and I think he's just showing no leadership qualities and no qualities at all. If he's not winning the ball in the air and he can't play with it at his feet, I really don't know what he's meant to be. In this era of we've got no Van der Ven, no Romero. Even if we are losing every game, he needs to be putting his foot down, saying, once they're back, this is my time to show the player I am, and he's not doing that.
And bear in mind, Spurs were supposedly competing with teams like Bayern Munich for his signature. We heard, I don't know if they were true or false. We heard stuff over. He's been at Spurs for about a year now, and we've heard multiple rumors of discontent to do with his agent and whatnot, sort of talking himself up to thinking the agent sort of thinking he might be better than Spurs, or he should be getting in ahead of Romero and Van der Ven, and why is he not getting game time? He's been given a chance, albeit it's not in the best team and in the best situation. You can only control what you do. You can only win your battles. We're not gonna if he's playing, for example, left centre back and Porro gets beaten and they score from there, we're not going to have a go at him. But he's not winning his battles. He's not playing simple passes sometimes. Playing it out of play. He's an international footballer. He's a Premier League footballer, and he can't get the basics right. So like I mentioned, I think the recruitment of him was very. It was very confusing. Like I said, we said this at the time. We looked at his numbers. We'd seen his, seen him play and Genoa play, and it didn't make sense. Which I think has kind of led into a bit of hesitation in this window from Tottenham.
I mean, like you said about the whole, he's been thrown into a bad team and he can only do like what's in front of him and the best of his ability. Archie Gray has done exactly that, and it's got to the point where, like, I don't know if you guys agree with me, I feel more comfortable with Archie Gray at the back than like maybe paired alongside Davis than what I would Davis and Dragazin, and he's not even a defender.
I think playing out. I think in a game where we Spurs want to dominate the ball, I think, Gray would be better because he's more likely to be able to, play progressively and play out of tight areas if he's played into pressure. I still don't, this is no discredit to Archie Gray. Like we said, he's a young lad. He's playing out of position and, he's shown great, promise and attitude to do that. I still think, Dragons in it would be a more secure defender just because, he's probably played at the back for, most of his life through multiple academies, multiple international setups and multiple managers. So I still think Dragons in, whilst he can do more, I still think defensively he edges Archie Gray. But I think, in terms of ball playing, Archie Gray is obviously miles clear.
Yeah, I find, just I probably echo what Jake says, but I think also feeling more secure with Archie Gray probably on the ball, but without the ball, I think it might appear that he's doing not a lot wrong, but I think he does maybe tend to hide in defensive situations where he's not either doing nothing right nor wrong. So it's kind of slightly a passenger in the defensive phase, but obviously on the ball he is a lot better. But yeah, I do fear when people are on the ball and they're running out Archie Gray. Not that you can't tackle someone, but that he is actually quite taller than you think as well. I think he's about 6'2" or 6'3", but I think on the pitch he just appears quite small, just because maybe his reputation or just how he appears.
Yeah, definitely. And as both of you have said with Dragons in, during the Euros, I remember the media coverage of him was insane. Like, because he was playing very, very well. But again, it was a Romania side where they literally were just sitting back, counter-attacking, not really having much of the ball. And that's the type of defender he is, really. Like, where he shouldn't be on the ball too much as a traditional defender, just getting your body on the line and like in between the ball and the goal.
He'd probably shine in a team like Forest or someone like that. But I remember the amount of blocks and slide tackles he was making. But just for the system we played, as Jake said, the recruitment seems absolutely ludicrous. And it seems like a weird stopgap.
Yeah, and you could call into question. You can develop young players and you can encourage people and you can train in different ways, but ultimately you're not going to be able to reshape a player. He's probably in his low to mid 20s. He's probably like 23, is he? Something like that. Ange isn't going to be able to change him as a player. He is what he is, and he's got the skills that he has. Maybe you could say, Ange has got to, adapt in that way. I think we do probably pass out more from Gray, which, makes sense. But is it worth, as a manager, asking a player to do something they're not really comfortable with? And when I sort of do stuff with my team that I manage, I never want to put a player in an uncomfortable position if it isn't for like sort of development to try and make them better. We're not developing Dragons in. He can become better, but we're not going to change his skill set completely. He's never going to be that guy to play out from the back. He can't do it. He's never been that guy. He never will be that guy. It's not something he's just going to pick up randomly. He could improve here and there and stop passing out play for no reason. But I just think, maybe you have to say with Ange, look, you've seen now he can't do it. Let's try something a little bit different. I know you don't want to abandon your philosophy, but like we said, keep using Gray. Obviously the other team might sort of adapt their press and stuff, but try and hide him from his weaknesses and play him to his strengths as much as possible, so you don't end up in situations where he's getting completely found out.
Yeah, the next topic kind of ties into Dragons in and the rest of the defense and the rest of the squad. Actually, I'm going to ask you guys your overall thoughts on the current squad. So I'll go through a list of players and whether you think that they are long term or they're good for the moment and we should maybe look to replace them in the future, or if you think we should just bin them off as soon as we possibly can. So I'll start
keeping it short and snappy.
Yeah, just one word answers. Sell, keep, and future, maybe.
Yeah. Unless there is a player that you want to go into detail. But it might be a bit of a controversial opinion, maybe. So I'll start off with the goalies. Fraser Forster.
Release.
Retire.
Can't get any money for him.
Hell. Send him to Audi or something. He's terrible.
Honestly, I understand. You've got to have senior figures and stuff like that. Him and Ben Davis's weekly wage is combined to 150k a week. We're paying those to 150k a week. Ben Davis is obviously a senior figure. He's been there for a long time. You could argue that he has something to offer. He's a bit more versatile. With Fraser, he's a goalie who's not going to play. He's going to be their trainer. He's going to be able to mentor younger goalies. In Kinski, Vicario is not that young. Spurs are paying him between 70 and 80 grand a week, I believe, for Fraser Foster. So it's like, that's an incredible wage that they'll want to get off the books. You know, Spurs have spoken about trimming wages and whatnot. You know, that's just one that has to go. Even if he was, you know, being pretty serviceable, you're just essentially throwing it down the drain.
Yeah, and Vicario next.
Keep. But we'll see how this Kinski thing goes. But I'll say keep.
Yeah, I'll keep Vicario. He's got his weaknesses, but he's passionate, you know, and I think he'll. I know this sounds like a stupid reason, but I think he'll play for the badge. You know, I remember when he said he would have walked and signed in blood to come to Tottenham. So I think you've got to keep the players around who are enthusiastic.
For sure. Who's next?
Should we go through centre backs now? Van de Ven, and this one, hear me out. I would say that for now he is good, but those injury concern for me is one of them. Obviously when he's fit, he's brilliant. However, he is hardly ever fit. And I think it will turn out like another Ledley King situation where he'll only be able to play like one game a week at max, and you'll have to pick and choose which one he comes from. So
I think
keep him.
I think we compare Romero and Van de Ven in the same conversation here. I think they're obviously both obvious keeps. They are our best defenders, but I think if you do get a big offer for them, you take it, because I think one of my favorite sayings is availability is the best ability, and they're never available. So if we do get a big offer, and Romero, Van de Ven, you know, they're attractive players, they could attract big offers like 60, 70 million upwards. And obviously we've heard rumours of Real Madrid, and I just say, if you get the big offer, we take it.
And I think you see it like so much nowadays. You know, we've seen with Trent and other players, Real Madrid is such an attractive outfit to go to. I think if Romero gets a bit annoyed with the situation at Spurs, he thinks, you know, Spurs don't even have Champions League, and I'm a World Cup winner. Like, what am I doing? You know, Spurs might not even have Europe next year. So I think, you know, his value is going to be, you know, fairly high. His contract's only going to go down. It's looked like he's not going to sign another contract. So I think, despite, you know, how much we like Romero, I think, you know, it's got to be a sell if a good offer comes in.
Yeah, I agree. And as well, it's one of them where if they don't want to be there, if they're not 100% committed, and I think Ange said something similar at the start when he first took over in his first summer window. He was saying that if their only reason they're wanting to come to a club is because we can offer them Champions League football, then they're not the sort of character that maybe should be at the club. Obviously, every player deep down will want to play in the top competitions, but that should not be the primary reason for coming to a club.
Yeah, and I think with Van de Ven as well, he's obviously a definite keep. But I think if I had to keep a player long term, let's say I could give one of them like a 5-year contract, sort of no opt-outs, I'd probably say Van de Ven, because I agree with Jack and yourself, Kyle, as in he's going to have to be minutes limited, but Spurs will and Van de Ven himself will just have to accept that, you know, if a hamstring injury keeps recurring, something's not right. And like Jack said, availability is absolutely crucial. You know, there's no point in having a player who's just injured all the time. So I think if Spurs can keep him, limit his minutes, you know, sort of for important games, because you can see the damage he can do. You know, even against Man United, that assist that he got running up the whole pitch and crossing it to Brennan Johnson, that's not normal. So you can see the talent and the player that Spurs have on their hands, and that's not something that you're going to want to try and get rid of. But yeah, I think there'll have to be serious conversations medically, like what's wrong with him, why are these injuries happening, you know, is it ground covered, is he committing a lot of sprints per game? I think limiting his minutes is a, you know, probably something that will happen if he stays around.
Yeah, I'll touch on the fullbacks now. So Pedro Porro to begin with.
I could go on for Porro for ages, but I'll just say keep, but we need to improve.
I think he's probably misprofiled. Like we said, when if you literally throw back about a year and a half ago, you know, Ange comes in, we're in August 2023. We were discussing, you know, before that season, it's going to be, you know, Porro and whoever the left back was, I can't remember, or Udogie and Emerson Royale. But there was this conception at Spurs that Udogie and Porro weren't going to play together. I think there was an idea that they're both more suited to a back five where they've got a bit more sort of license to go forward and defensive coverage. And I think that's why Porro is he's getting obviously some stick on Twitter and whatnot. And his performances haven't been great, but I think for him to be the player that we want him to be and he wants to be, the squad needs to be he if he's not playing in the back five, he's got to have a quick physical defender behind him. For example, Trent, obviously, he gets questions asked of him defensively. He has, when he's not injured, Kanate covering him, who's, physical, he's quick, he's imposing, he's got great recovery time. If Trent gets caught up the pitch, Kanate is sweeping up. Archie Gray is not going to be, Archie Gray's not Kanate, and he's not the same profile as Kanate, and this is no hate on him. He's supposed to be a midfielder. So Porro is obviously going to get found up more when he goes up. She's probably been instructed to get balls into the box and create an extra man. Gray's not going to be able to give him that cover that other attacking fullbacks get. So I think he probably gets a bit too much stick. I can understand people might question his positioning, but I think if he's not playing in the back five, if you're keeping it with a back four, he needs a better centre half to cover him.
Yeah.
And Jed Spence, the other right back. Yeah, I'd say keep.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, he's done. I think he's been our best player in this terrible period. So definite keep.
Yeah. I don't think there's really much debate in that one. And we'll move on to the left-sided fullbacks. I'll put all three of them in the same category: Udogie, Reguilon, Ben Davies.
Reguilon, flipping out. Now, obviously, keep Udogie. We saw what he can be, and I think he's really suffered from playing the amount of minutes he's had to. Well, I think there's a world-class player in there potentially. So obviously keep Udogie. Ben Davies has been a great servant for the club. He can fill in at centre-back. I think, and obviously he helps out with registration rules. I think it'd be silly to sell him because as a backup, what he should be, not playing every week, he's a great option as that. And Reguilon, I mean, he's
cool. Who's that guy? But no, I agree. I think Davies, you're not gonna get money for him or anything. If he goes, it's probably going to be like an end of contract thing to the Championship or something like that. Maybe back to Swansea or whatever. But I think you keep him. Udogie, like Jack said, he looks incredibly lethargic. I think that's the way to describe it. We don't know, is that just him? And we just didn't notice it while Spurs fans were experiencing euphoria on the 10-win streak or wherever it was back at the beginning of last season. So maybe we just didn't clock it at the time. There's something not quite right with him. Defensively, he should have all the tools to be good. He's tall. He'll be decent in the air. He's fast and he's strong. But I think he does get beat sort of at his feet a bit too much for a defender that you're going to win the league with. So I think maybe it's another one with Porro where he wants to play wing back and he's been a little bit misprofiled and out of position. But he's still young. He's got time to develop, and I think he's a definite keep because you've got to think let's say we didn't have Udogie and you had to replace Udogie, it's going to be hard to find a fullback of that level who isn't going to. Every player comes with their negatives, so it's just how we deal with his drawbacks and how we exploit his strengths.
Is there an argument to say that maybe he has just been playing a lot of football off the back of a really big injury in the summer and a surgery at a young age, and when we have gone to rest him, I think we had to rest him against who did we play when Dragazin got sent off early on in the Europa League?
Karabag?
Yes.
Yeah.
He came on for Bergvall, and then in the Carabao Cup against Man City, Van der Ven came off injured and he had to come on. So when we haven't gone to rest him, he has had to come on quite early on and play pretty much a full game. Is there an element to say that maybe some of that lethargicness that he shows is just down to playing a crazy amount of games with very little rest and a summer where he was recovering from a big injury? Was it his back? Did he have a back injury?
I'm not sure.
I'm not quite sure, but I think this will be answered. When he returns fully, obviously you're going to be come back from an injury, get back to fitness. It could just be, I know this sounds stupid, that could just be his running style. He could just run like he's tired and not actually be, and we're just kind of making something of nothing. I think he's obviously not played for a while. So when he does come back, if it's looking the same, that might just be him. If he looks fresh again, then it's looking onwards and upwards.
Yeah. Now to the midfield, I'll start off with both Bissouma and Bentancur.
I think they're both. I think Bentancur is really unlucky. Obviously, the ACL. But before all of he's been so unlucky with injuries and just even the recent stuff at Liverpool. He's never, ever since he had that ACL, he's never had a good run in the side. He's always been disruptive. But before that, there was an easy argument to say he was our best player at the club up there with Kane. He was unbelievable when he first came in. But, when he's not been able to get fit and get a run of games, it's really showed. And he has looked a little slower, a little lethargic. Obviously, not up to match fitness. But, if we can get him back to his best, he's obviously an amazing asset for this club. Speaking about Bissouma, I think he's so inconsistent. And I don't know when we can actually stop trying with Bissouma every week. He'll play, even if he's rubbish the week before, he'll play again. And it's a bit of a discredit to those that sit on the bench. But, he is so inconsistent. And that is the frustration with him, I think. 1 week, he's probably one of the best midfielders in the league. And the next week, he wouldn't be looking out of place in the National League, Yeah. So I think the extremes are so vast. I think Bissouma, I wouldn't be disappointed if he left.
Yeah, I agree with you there, because you've got to think, playing like the 6, is that a position where you want to have an inconsistent player? Like, would you rather a player drop like a 5 out of 10 than an 8? Or would you rather them just drop like a 7 every week? And I'm thinking most people would rather just take the consistency, maybe not some of the highs, but, avoiding some of the lows. And I think in the 6, you want someone who's steady, someone's going to be there, be reliable. I think he's done better not getting sent off this year, especially for diving. I think he's an interesting case. I think with Bentancur, if an offer came in, Spurs would definitely consider it. Obviously, looking at the money and thinking, is there a replacement sort of lined up? Because, like you said, if he's going to have injury concerns, and since that ACL, he's, like Jack said, he never had a run that could just continue forever. We're speaking about like when these players come back, but they might never really go back to their old self. So there's always an argument to sell these two. I don't think they're untouchable. At the beginning of last season, we were raving about Bissouma, but yeah, he is inconsistent, and I wouldn't be opposed to Spurs, moving on from that and starting with a new DM for a new phase of the club.
Yeah, and then moving on to the 8s. So I'll say Bergvall, Archie Gray, and Pap Sarr. Those 3. What do we think of?
Well, let's just keep this one short and snappy. They're young. They are meant to be the future of the club. So obviously we're going to keep them.
I agree, but with Sarr, I think I'd keep him, but I think I'd try and mold him into a backup player. Maybe a guy who comes off the bench, gives some legs, covers some grounds, and maybe like breaks up the game. But I don't think he's quite like we said before in discussion. I think you were saying it last week in the podcast, and we've discussed it off the pod as well, how he can be a bit ghosty, a bit sort of along for the ride. He isn't going to change a game, and when Bergvall plays, you notice it. He's getting stuck in. He gets that camera time. I know it's like a stupid like sort of anecdote, but he gets the camera time because he's active. He's involved in the play. I think Sarr, he's quite quiet. Maybe he's like a steady one that you like to have because he's not going to do anything crazy. But I think as long as he's happy being a backup and coming off the bench most of the time and being a rotation player, I think that's probably about his level. And I think you guys would agree, because we'd all say that Gray and Bergvall have higher ceilings than him.
Yeah, 100%.
Kyle, what do you think about those 3?
I think obviously Bergvall and Gray, absolute keep. Like, we cannot let them go. I think it's like particularly Bergvall in the midfield recently has probably been one of the only shining lights in the midfield, which obviously some of it is down to him playing less than some of the other players that have been. So he naturally, and being younger as well, he naturally will have like a bit more energy about him. But it's whenever he is on the ball, he just does look a lot more confident, and he always looks to go forward. Obviously, he's definitely more of an attacking player than what Sarr is, but it's just whenever Sarr's on the ball at the moment, he never really kind of gets me excited about what he's going to do. Whenever Bergvall's on the ball, I do think like, oh, come on, he could make something of this move. Whereas Sarr, I am kind of half expecting a sideways or a backwards pass, or just kind of like just maintaining possession, which is good against some teams, like when you're just wanting to see a game out, or maybe against a team that is sitting in a lower block and you're just trying to figure something out. But against the teams where like you know that you've got very limited chances and you have to take them, I'd definitely say that Bergvall is that guy for that. So
what do you guys think the long-term plan is for like the Spurs midfield? So people have been saying about Gray as a 6, Bergvall as an 8, or maybe the club have other plans, because they're players at that level where you want them to start. It's not going to be like Bergvall starts and Gray benches and they rotate. They're both going to want to, and they're both going to develop, hopefully, to be those starting players. So how do you think, as a midfield 3, they sort of fit together? You think they'll play with 2 8s, but do you think that's not sort of attacking enough? If we had Bergvall and Gray as like 2 8s at the same time, you think it's not quite forward thinking with a 6 behind them?
Yeah,
do you think
I definitely think Gray was brought in to be that kind of 6. I did see in one of his first interviews, he did say he likes to prefer the 8, but I don't think his attacking prowess is that of Bergvall. Bergvall loves to play a progressive pass, loves to thread the eye of the needle. I think Bergvall is going to be so important for us in a few years, even currently in that 8 position. And I think if Gray is going to cement a position in this 11 in the next 2-3 years, it's going to be in that 6 role. And I think we're going to have to look to bring in another 10, because as we'll bring on, I don't think James Maddison has been up to it as of recent.
Yeah, and I think it's a huge, I won't say it's like an issue, but I think in football in the modern era, there's a mass misprofiling of players, and the one I find the most is between the 6 and the 8, and even at like youth level and at men's level. If you're a 6 who isn't like a deep lying playmaker who's going to pick the ball up from the goalie and look forward, if you're like a technical 6, you end up sort of becoming misprofiled and moving to the 8. You see it with a lot of players. So I think the 6 role is incredibly difficult to get right, because you end up with if the player is too good essentially on the ball, they sort of, people think, oh, they're so good on the ball, let's move them forward a bit. So I think unless you're like a destroyer in the 6, you're probably going to end up as the 8. So with Gray, I'm not too sure. Is he gonna, he's obviously got an athletic build, but he's not like massively like strong. And it depends. Are we gonna have him in the 6 who's a little bit probably more lightweight? He's still obviously tall and got stature. Or do Spurs want to look for a destroyer in the 6 who's going to get the ball, distribute it, and have those technical players in the 8s?
Yeah, and touching on all of this as well, I'd say that I spoke to a lad called Simon, who's quite a prominent figure within like Spurs Twitter, and he made the point of that he's not entirely sure that Gray straight away would be able to play as well as what he did in the Championship, receiving the ball like with his back to the opposition goal. Because a lot of like Postecoglou's style of play relies on the 6, where they are pressed a fair bit and they kind of need that individual intelligence to kind of get out of like tricky scenarios.
And what I think could end up sort of happening, obviously it's up to Ange, but in a 4-3-3, you've obviously got the one pivot and the 2 8s, or an 8 and a 10. What I like to do is have the 4-2-3-1. You're essentially keeping a similar midfield with an 8 who just starts a bit deeper. So, for example, if we had a 4-2-3-1 at Spurs, the front 3 is essentially the same. The 10 would just be one of the midfielders, sort of a little bit more advanced. But the double 6s would kind of be, a destroyer and a ball player. So the ball player is a guy, like you said, who can receive the ball on the turn and play it forward. But I think the 6 is key for, in the Premier League, there's so many good 10s. There's so many strikers who can drop deep. We're increasingly seeing midfielders making advanced runs up the pitch. I think it's absolutely non-negotiable that you need a 6 there who's going to, sit in that space, really try and stop the other team from playing. So I'm a big fan of having, a traditional sort of defensive midfielder in there. And I think the best way to fit them in who might not be as good on the ball alongside a ball player is to go to a 4-2-3-1 with like a double pivot, if you want to call it that, and one ball player and one destroyer.
And you said about like the player playing in the 10. I'll include Kulusevski as a 10 in this, because he has been playing down the middle a lot more this season, and a lot of his better performances have been down, like when he's been playing down the middle. James Maddison and Kulusevski, keep, sell, or keep but look to offload in the future?
I think obviously Kulusevski is an easy keep. He might even be getting to the point where he's too good to be playing for a mid-table Premier League club, because that's what we are right now, even bottom half Premier League club. Maddison's a weird one. He started the season so well. I think he's on 8 goals and 4 assists. And then he kind of just seemed to drop out the 11 because Kulusevski became so vital to the way we played. But I think James Maddison has been a little hard done by. And I also think, as Jake said, I think he is a little bit misprofiled. He loves to almost drop deep and get it off the defender sometimes. But I don't think that's where he's best and that's where we need him. I think the best way I've seen Spurs play is when Maddison plays in this sort of left half space Met Salah role and Son drifts inside, and that's where we think we really see the best of our players. But I think we kind of can't play with that 2-10 balance, which we tried at the start of the season. It worked in some games, it didn't in some. And I think Ange's not going to do it again. So I think the way going forward, I'm not sure how he's going to play with Maddison and Kulusevski, but I think it would be a great loss if we lost James Maddison.
Yeah, I think like with Jack, Kulusevski is an obvious keep, probably future captain of the club if he sort of manages to get it off Son before someone else gets it. In me and Jack's Football Manager save, Kulusevski still at Spurs in 2036. And, I think Spurs fans would, if he can continue to sort of improve at how he's been doing, the Spurs fans wouldn't, turn that down for him to be there in 10, 11 years. I think Maddison's a weird one. Like you said, I think he's quite deceptive in terms of he obviously looks a little bit older. He kind of, his fitness, and obviously he never plays like a 90 really. He comes off the bench or gets hooked at sort of 60. I think he's one that Spurs will want to keep. He's probably, you'd like to think he's a good influence in the changing room, despite some rumours. He's obviously English. He's contributing towards homegrown, which you need in European competitions and in league. He's a weird one because he's probably one of the highest earners. I didn't manage to look before the stream, but I imagine he's up there with the highest earners. He's a big name. I can imagine him getting annoyed if he really drops out of favour. He's a difficult one, like you said. Invert the wing, and Leicester fans call him the 33% man, and you kind of indirectly said it. First 33% of the season unplayable, second 33% injured, and then third of the season he's just trash. So yeah, it would be a keep, but it's one to watch. I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up moving on to another Premier League team in the next couple of years.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'd definitely agree with the pair of you. Kulusevski's untouchable really in the squad. It's such a shame really that he's had to play so many minutes because of the injuries, because he has recently started to look quite lethargic, quite tired. But I mean, I believe like as of today, he has played the most minutes within the squad. I think second is Pedro Porro, which could also explain as well why Porro's been playing badly. But I'll move to the wings now, and left wing I'll include all three of them together: Son, Werner, and Mikey Moore.
Odebear as well.
And Odebear, yeah, Odebear.
Yeah, I'll start on my most favourite, Mikey Moore.
Mikey Moore.
This guy is absolutely unbelievable. And if he doesn't start tomorrow, it's an absolute travesty. Against Everton, you saw he completely changed the game. He's so positive in everything he does. Every action he has, he looks to go forward. Unless he always tries to play the way he's facing, which is what you're taught when you're young, and he still is young. It's unbelievable. The maturity he plays with is just class. And, in the summer we saw 7-figure fee, 8-figure fee. I don't know what it was. Chelsea, Dortmund coming in for him, I think around 30 million euros. Like, this guy is the truth, and other clubs are realising that. He's only got 2 years left on his deal. If Spurs aren't going to, utilise him and play him as he should be, this guy is good enough to be playing first-team football. His attributes are so good. You see that cross at the weekend? It's like that Yamal-type cross, and that cross is so effective. And I think, it's what we've been lacking on that left wing, a bit of dynamism, if that is a word.
Yeah.
Just to get at the fullback and, be positive with it, which I think, coming on to Son, I think it's obvious sell. I think he's at the end of his tenure here. He obviously got another year on his contract, which I don't really agree with. But, the captain of the club, we're sort of forced into playing him every week, which,
yeah.
I
think that is a very interesting dilemma. Like you said, with the Son extension, maybe that is just because the club want to try and, try their hand in the summer, see if they can get anything for him. And it just kind of gives the club an extra window or 2 windows to, potentially get a fee for him from, wherever he may be interested in going. I think he right now he is seeming like a bit of a block to Moore's development. It's not like Moore's gonna play in one of the youth teams anymore. Obviously, he gets youth football at England when there's international breaks, but he's not a kid anymore who's just going to step into the squad like some of the other boys who are going to, they don't get on, but it doesn't really matter because they're going to go play in PL2. I think the reason why Ange is continually playing Son. Of course, he's the captain. Of course, we have that discourse, and of course, he's a long term sort of servant of the club, and he can be a good player. I think Ange doesn't want to go to these places, especially away from home, and remove a senior figure from the squad. So Son, like we know, he's not aggressive. He's not intimidating. He's not gonna scare the other team. But I think Ange is probably a bit hesitant to go somewhere, drop another senior member of the squad, which we've been saying, most of them are injured anyway. Can you imagine us going to away, maybe Hoffenheim? I'm not sure what that atmosphere is like. And even the Goodison, the stadium's pretty on top of each other and the crowd can become hostile. Starting with those young players, he probably sees that as a bit of a recipe for disaster because, maybe he doesn't trust the youth as much, which we've kind of seen with limited opportunities. So I think he just wants to try and maintain a certain amount of senior players in the squad rather than, go in there. Let's say we lined up with, Moore, Bergvall, Gray, these young players. There's probably a bit of fear of sort of being run over by some experienced players, strong players. Everton's midfield is extremely strong physically. They run a lot. They cover a lot of ground. And their Mikey Moore came on against Tired Legs and did extremely well. But against O'Brien, who I think he's like 6'5", is that something that you want to really throw a 18? I think he's 18-year-old into 17-year-old into.
I'd like to add to you said about Tired Legs. I think that going forward, Son should be utilised in that way of where if he is to play, he should be coming on with maybe, I don't know, like 20 minutes, half an hour to go. Which
on the wing.
On the wing, yeah, on the wing. And I think purely because of all the injuries we've had, Richarlison's only just came back. Odegaard he's pretty much might as well have not played for us this season. I think he's played under 5 games or something like that. And then Moore was with some sort of illness, like a bit of speculation about what that was. But
I think Odegaard's an interesting one because, obviously it was a bit of an opportunistic signing with Burnley going down. But I think if you look at his attributes and what his numbers say, people always complain about, a certain other winger at our club, not being able to take on his man. Odegaard should be that guy. So whilst he haven't played and, he's, maybe his end product will be lacking as a young winger and he's been injured this whole time. I think if we want to look at a winger who's like direct gonna take his man on, he had, incredible sort of take on rate and success rate. So I think we don't have to look any further for a winger of that style. It's just a question of, how long is it going to be before he's ready to start for Tottenham? Doing a season at Burnley in a relegation team isn't, the same as stepping into the TH Stadium. So yeah, I think it's one where you have to be patient.
I mean, you said about the successful take-ons. I'm pretty sure he was in the list with Yamal, which obviously it's a bit different. Yamal's playing for Barcelona and a lot more competitions against more better opponents in Europe and stuff. Whereas Odegaard was doing it for Burnley, where he would be receiving the ball a lot less than what maybe Yamal would. But then you could also make an argument of that Odegaard is being given less opportunities to complete them than dribbles, and yet he's still got a higher percentage. So it is impressive.
And I think his style of play leads us to sort of believe that if the left winger is going to be the take on guy, Solanke's obviously a presence in the middle, and we'll get onto him. And Johnson, people say, Johnson can't take on his man and whatnot, but we say he gets into good areas. He gambles, he gets into the box, he gets to the back post, he gets to the goal, he gets to the net, and he scores goals. He might not offer as much in build up, and he might be quite frustrating to watch sometimes. But if you have that left winger who's able to beat his man, get balls into the box, Johnson is going to be able to be there. So I think they're probably hoping that Odegaard comes along, can be threatening guy down the left, get it into Solanke and anyone else arriving in the box, and that should get Spurs some goals.
The right flank now, and I'll I'll carry on with talking about Brennan Johnson, and I'd say that I wouldn't sell him, but I do think that he is one of them players where he needs the rest of the team firing and like on their A game in order for him to play well. He's not really one of them players that can kind of grab the game by the scruff of the neck and change it, kind of thing. When we have been playing bad, I'll be honest, he has been pretty non-existent, which, you know, you could say that maybe it's down to a lack of service up front. You could say that, you know, maybe it's his job to get on the ball and like make something of the game, but he gets into brilliant positions, but he needs others to get the ball to him where he is.
I think he's been handed a very difficult hand of cards, if you know what I mean. I think, you know, obviously the fee, people, like you say, fees put on pressure onto players, and, you know, he was perhaps overpaid for. I think it was around 50 mil, something like that. Spurs fans, you know, they're going to see that as an opportunity cost. You know, 50 million on Johnson is, you know, money we Spurs didn't spend elsewhere. So I think he kind of probably gets a bit of stick for that. And like you said, he is someone who is a bit, I won't say he's like a luxury player, but like you said, he does a lot better when the team does better. But I think he's also a bit unlucky in a way that wingers are going to be the most inconsistent players. You know, they always have been. You know, the wingers who are consistently good are the world class ones, and most wingers are probably inconsistent. You know, they always, you know, end up getting subbed off. They get rotated. It's easier, arguably, it's easier to defend a duel than win one as an attacker. You know, you guys have played yourself. You know, it's quite difficult to like take someone on, especially against, you know, Premier League level player. So I think he's quite unlucky because wingers are naturally pretty inconsistent, and, you know, he's not going to be a world class player, and he will be inconsistent. You know, he's got the fee sort of on his shoulders, which I think is a bit, you know, harsh. You know, it's never the player's fault how much the sort of club negotiates for them, and if Nottingham Forest were in sort of FFP trouble. So yeah, I think it's a bit tough on him. You know, he does contribute at goals, which I think is good for a winger. You know, he gets in dangerous areas, but like you said, he's a tough one to comment on, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree with. I think we touched on it last week about how Johnson has to, you know, the team has to be firing for him to score. And, you know, when we see those low crosses coming in, he is in good positions. You know, I think people have likened him to Raheem Sterling at Man City. But Raheem Sterling probably a bit more dynamic. But, you know, in terms of that final third and being in the right position at the right time, we've seen Johnson there many times this year. And, you know, I think it's just a matter of, I think we will see the rewards of Johnson once we get everyone back fit. But, you know, as a guy to take on his man, I think Spurs fans shouldn't expect that of him. But I think, you know, with the price tag, we kind of see him as maybe being that all-action winger, which I don't think he is.
Could you say that maybe he's been misprofiled a bit, and he's not really suited as being a touchline winger, but more as an inside forward like he was at Forest? Because when he's in that position of in the penalty box, we've seen it a few times, to be fair, in Europe and in the league, where he drills it bottom corner across the goal into the bottom left corner, where he's in that central role.
I think his numbers obviously speak for themselves for him as a finisher. You know, I think he's probably the second. He's definitely in the top 3 scorers of Spurs this season, I believe. And, you know, he got a decent amount of goals and sort of assists last season for Forest in that Championship year. He got over 20 goals, I think. You know, it was a lot of games, of course, but to score 20 goals in the Championship, you know, it's not a given. You know, there's a lot of players who wouldn't do that. So I think he's obviously a great finisher. You know, I wasn't watching Forest that much back then, so I'm not sure quite how he was utilised. You mentioned him being an inside forward, but yeah, I think it's a bit, like I said with Dragosin, it's a bit harsh to judge players trying to learn things and do things which they might not be asked to. Obviously, we had the whole social media sort of malarkey earlier this season with him, but I think he's probably a player that you want to get behind. You know, I really want to see him do well, not just because of the fantasy draft, but yeah, I want to see him do well. I think, you know, he gets in the right areas, and, you know, a better Spurs team who are going to get more chances, have more balls in the box, he's going to pick up goals and cause some problems.
I'll move on to the final 3 now up front, and that will be Solanke, Richarlison, and Will Lancashire.
Yeah, I think. Well, obviously, Solanke, I think he's been brilliant for what he is. I think, 65 million, whatever it was, you know, it's the price you're going to have to pay for, you know, a striker that got nearly 20 goals in the Premier League last year, an English striker especially. I think he's been unbelievable. Even in games he doesn't score, you know, we've seen him drop in deep, link in play, pressing. His pressing's unbelievable. maybe we're seeing the detriment of that with him being injured now. But I think Solanke as a pickup, as a whole, he's everything that Spurs needed. In terms of Richarlison, I think, last year he had that run where I think he scored 8 goals in 8 games. He's definitely got the ability, but he is a bog standard. I don't think he's ever got more than 14 in the league. He's never going to be that player to bring us to the next level. As a backup option, he's not bad, but he's never available. So is he really that backup option? And I don't know, Richarlison's a tough one, but we wanted to ship him in the summer, which I don't think too many Spurs fans would have objected to. But yeah, if he went to Saudi and we got a decent fee, maybe half or just over half more than what we got what we paid for him, I think Spurs fans would take that.
To be honest, I really like Richarlison because I think people sort of look back on like the Barclays era of the Premier League and they see these types of players that don't really exist anymore. I think he's extremely passionate. With the Liverpool game, you saw him celebrating the goal at the front of the bench. Celebrating it hugely. I think he loves the club, and I think he really obviously everyone wants him to do well. But I think, like you said, as a backup, he's great coming off the bench. He's disruptive. I think he's bit of like a bit of a jack of all trades. I think he can do a little bit of everything. He's aerially there. He can, he's like Jack said, his max was 14 goals, I think, but I think he's reached 10 plus goals in the Prem 4 or 5 times, which it was not easy to do. So I think depending on his wages and offers coming in, it might be one they want to offload because of the injury sort of stuff that's been going on with him for probably over a year now. He's always picking up sort of different things and had different surgery over that time, but I really like him. And for Solanke, I think he's probably my favorite Spurs player. He just, at the time I was a bit skeptical. Like Jack said, sometimes you've just got to pay the fee to get the player. Bournemouth have pretty much an established Prem team at this point, and he's obviously an England player or English player. I think he does everything that Spurs can need, physical, pushing people off the ball. I remember in the Liverpool game as well, he's, muscled the Liverpool centre-back to sort of hold it up. I think he gets into good areas. I think he can link up play as well. I really like him as a player, and I think, he's obviously a keep for as long as he's firing for.
I mean, Ange just kind of made us all look silly, to be fair, because I remember in the summer there was quite a few, like, not talking about you guys specifically, but just amongst the Tottenham fan base that were really turning, like myself included, actually, were turning their noses up at Solanke and were saying, like, a few people were saying about Ivan Toney. And I mean,
I think I was one of those people. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, as you were saying, Ange, obviously they looked at the numbers, and it definitely is a number sign, and you can see we're reaping the rewards of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, touching on Will Lancashire, I think he's young, he's quite raw. Obviously, going through the youth setup and stuff, he has used his physicality to get by, which, I mean, going forward, he probably won't be able to use that as much in Premier League football when he's playing grown men in the strongest, like the most physical league in the world. I do think he's a keep, but I'd like to see him loaned out somewhere, maybe in the Championship or even
definitely. I think
lower,
he had
lower Prem.
I think in the summer there were offers for him to leave on a permanent, so I'm not sure what was going on there, but he definitely needs minutes. I think we saw when he started against Galatasaray and Ferencvaros this year. I think, as you were saying, he has used that physicality when he's in the younger age groups, but I don't think his jumping prowess is that good. I don't think he is actually that good aerially. So I think he's going to have to work on that. And obviously that's just going to come with he needs minutes. So I think he's definitely a keep and a loan.
Yeah, but what I would say, obviously, with homegrown rules and stuff, with that Galatasaray start, scoring away at Galatasaray is not easy to do. Emoting on their fans, he's got that dog in him a little bit, so I think he's an interesting one. You want to get him game time because ultimately that's how people improve. He's not going to improve sitting on the bench. So I'd like to see him a loan, whether it be to, I'd probably rather him, if he's at that level, a top flight loan. It could obviously probably going to be abroad if he wants to go abroad, and maybe the Championship if that's where they see his level at. But I think he's an interesting profile. He kind of reminds me, I haven't seen a lot of him play that much, but he kind of reminds me of Valise in a way where he's kind of like supposed to be that sort of big sort of target forward, but he's not really. He's kind of in between, not like massively tall, sort of like an Awani, sort of not that tall. You'd think he's like massive, but he's sort of a bit misinterpreted a little bit. But yeah, I think obviously it's a keep. See how his development goes. If he gets game time and scores goals at another club, and then you go from there.
Yeah, for sure. I think this one's going to run over a bit, isn't it? But I'm more than happy to.
Yeah, we're reaching the 55-minute mark, and we've just made it about halfway. So Yeah, it will be
That's
quite
cool.
a longer one, but I reckon these next ones might not be as long. Sorry. So the next topic is a debate about Ange Postecoglou. What are your guys' stances? Because I don't think I've ever seen a social media so divided on a manager of whether he should be in or out. It's either been back the manager with like Pochettino or with Conte and Nuno. It was everyone was saying get him out, get him out. So what are your thoughts, guys?
I'll let you go, Jay.
Is it? Well, I'm very strongly Ange In. I'm not like I'm a Tottenham follower, but I'm not Tottenham like supporter. I don't bleed white. It's not in the family, but I was subjected to watching them under Conte a bit after living with Jack. So I've watched them for a few years, and I've seen the difference in football. And I think football and most sort of professional sports which are widely viewed because of clickbait culture and stuff like that, I think people's memories are becoming increasingly short. At the beginning of Ange's tenure, I think it was 3 Premier League manager of the months in a row. It was at least 2. I think it might have even been 3.
It was 3.
No,
it was 3.
Yeah, it was 3. No manager does that. That's incredibly difficult to do, and that's when that's when he had the squad. It wasn't his squad, but he had the players available. Spurs were top of the league in about game week 11 or game week 12, and people have such a short memory. They're thinking now he's just completely just gone to a guy who can't manage a football team. He's shown us that with the players available and with the situation we were in until that Chelsea game, he's able to get Tottenham Hotspur to the top of the league. When was the last time Spurs were top before Andrew was in charge? Probably donkeys years ago, and I haven't got it on me right now to bring up, but I remember in our group chat the other day, we sent a sort of a graphic, which we can probably find and post somewhere, of wins and losses and draws under Ange, and it was split into the seasons. He goes on some great streaks and then obviously some inconsistent ones, which is what's going to happen with a manager who plays sort of attacking football and wants to sort of take those risks and attack rather than sit back. I think I saw a poll on Twitter. I think it had about 5,000 votes, and it was literally about 49-51, like Ange In, Ange Out. So like you said, it's completely torn, but I'm firmly Ange In, and there's a few reasons. So if you're listening to this and you're Ange Out, this is my plea to you to back him. So first of all is having patience in the project. There's been times over the years, people I've seen rumors that people sort of referring to Spurs as like the 18-month sort of club where a manager doesn't get it right straight away, and then you restart. Conte and Mourinho are win now managers. They're incredibly experienced. They've won a lot in their careers. They're going to set you up. They're going to make you hard to beat. And Mourinho got sacked before that cup final. You never know what that could have come to. So it's a win now, but I don't think that's like a type of manager you want to build a project with. I think with Ange, they're obviously the Spurs are looking at more sort of data-driven recruitment. Obviously, they've been doing that for a long time, but sort of seeing the success of some other clubs, I think they're sort of leaning into that. So I think you have to have patience in the project. He's had some signings. Of course, he's had some signings. They spent money. Levy's bagged him a little bit here and there with some players. Solanke 65. That's a lot of money. Johnson 50. I think if you want Ange out, you're basically saying you don't believe that his style of play can win games in the Premier League, which is proven that it can. If Ange is out, obviously you've got to assess the manager market. Who would be picking up? And you're basically saying you believe in their football philosophy more. So if you don't believe in his philosophy, then I can understand why you'd want him out. But you've got to understand the cards he's been dealt, especially this year. So look, I'll bring it up now. People are saying, I've seen rumors in the last few days of Ange's, training. Even you guys are saying, Ange's training is probably like too intense. Let me bring this up. So this is, you can guys see it, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is Ange's last season under Celtic. And this is when they won the league, and this is like an injury sort of table. So you can see here, green means they started, and the injury is the sort of obviously injury ones. A lot of these players are on loan, which you can see. But look how much green there is. There's a few injuries here and there. This guy missed 6 games. This guy missed 6 games. This guy was injured for the season. But there's a lot of green, and you might think there's a lot of injuries. But if I bring up the other screen of the Spurs one from this season, you'll see how much red there is compared to that last one. If you look at that, I understand it's been sort of extended to the end of the season. If you cut it out, you can see how much red there is around here. Look at all of this. So I think you can't, especially looking at the Celtic one, I don't think you can say, his style of play and his training, you know, is what's getting these players injured. You know, he's won leagues in Japan. So, you know, he's managed to build a squad that can last the season and win a league. He's done it in Scotland. You know, I know they're not the same standard, but I don't think you can categorically say he is the reason why people are getting injured. And we obviously have to look at the depth. You know, I think if you look at the Spurs squad, the depth and even just the quality of some of the players, Spurs probably aren't underperforming as much as people think. You know, people think of them as a big six team, a team that wants to be challenging. You know, especially after last year, you know, celebrating the league in September or whatever it was. If you actually look at Spurs' squad, you know, Bissouma's starting every week. You've got Draggers in playing, Gray starting at the back. Compare that to the top half teams now. The mid-table, as a neutral, I absolutely love it. The mid-table is closing that gap. You know, Bournemouth have a great team. You know, if you look at their defense, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of Spurs fans would trade our defense, our current defense, which has been playing a lot of the games, for the Bournemouth defense. You know, getting Kirke, Zabiani, Dean Huijsen and whatnot. I think you could argue that the mid-table teams' squads are better than Spurs. So like I said, of course, Spurs have the reputation and, you know, and stuff like that, and they want to be pushing on. But realistically, is the squad even built for that level? You know, even Fulham are high up. You know, Brighton have obviously got quite a few players. They recruit well. Forest, you know, doing incredibly well, and they've managed to make their squad work. You know, and I think you've got to, if you're Ange Out, you've got to look at it and think, you know, these are the injuries that are happening. They didn't happen at Celtic. They didn't happen in Japan. You can put some of it down to luck and some of it down to fixture congestion and whatnot, but you can't say it's his style of play which is the primary cause of this, or his training, because it's not happened elsewhere. And I think one more thing I want to touch on before is one thing that you've said, or I know Jack you've said it, is about stubbornness and sort of willing adaptability. I think it's incredibly difficult one to get right. It's like a balancing act, because I mentioned a couple of times, you know, I've taken charge of a few games myself, and you've really got to try and stick to your philosophy, because if you're, you know, they say some managers are sort of adaptive, some managers are proactive and some are reactive. You know, ultimately you want to be the proactive manager who's setting the tempo, you know, playing your game, and you want the other team to basically have to adapt to you because you're causing them that threat. You don't want Ange or a manager to become that reactive manager where we're just trying to nullify the other team. You know, Ange is getting sort of criticized for being proactive and sticking to his philosophy. You know, if the philosophy is proven to have worked for that period when Spurs were top, and the one main thing which I think is why, you know, the stubbornness thing isn't completely a negative. If you're a manager in that change room, they're Premier League footballers, they understand football better than anyone else in the world. If you change your philosophy and you change the way you play, especially because of, you know, people talking who don't really know about football, they will sense that you don't even believe in the philosophy yourself. If Ange changes, the players will clock he doesn't even believe in what he's telling people, because obviously you can adapt here and there and have little tweaks and little changes, but you can't change the style of play. Because even for me, teaching, doing some under 18s, you know, I can probably sense, you know, if I'm being too reactive and too worried about the other team and thinking, oh, blimey now, like, got to change this, I'm not going to stick to what I want to do, they're going to think you don't even know what you're talking about. You don't believe in yourself, so why should we? So I think changing his philosophy and being stubborn is one way that can lead to him losing the dressing room if he does adapt too much. So yeah, I'm firmly Ange in, as you can tell, and I think, you know, Ange Out, Ange Out brigade should reconsider. You know, people are turning on Levy, and I've seen even, you know, mainstream media talking about the depth and comparing squads to the mid-table teams. But I honestly think Spurs aren't underperforming as much as people sort of say they are.
Yeah, I think that was very, very strong. I think after hearing that, I don't think anyone could be Ange Out, and I haven't been anyway. I think the main thing is back or sack, and as three gentlemen right here, we don't want to be seeing any sack. So I think Levy, it obviously stems from Levy, but what Ange is doing is, you know, his philosophy is attacking football. It's what Spurs have always wanted at the Lane. We had Mourinho, we had Conte. It was boring. We win, lose. You know, it's not what Spurs wanted. We wanted this attacking manager, and now we've got it. And if we're not going to, I tell you right now, if we sack Ange, it will be the worst thing our club has done in a few years. But if we get anyone else in, I genuinely think we drop even further down the table. Honestly, the as Jake said, the cards he's been dealt has been a very harsh hand. And if we sack Ange, I honestly think this football club is going to implode. and Daniel Levy is going to be right at the heart of it. And obviously it goes back to that. Is he getting backed enough as other managers? We see, Man City have spent how much in this transfer window? Over 100, over 200 million maybe. Yeah, it's ridiculous. And obviously we're not Manchester City, but Tottenham Hotspur bring in, I think, maybe top 10 sports revenue in for football, and we just don't ever see that output. Daniel Levy obviously is a great businessman, but I think if Spurs are ever going to change, it's going to have to be a big change. We can't just keep bobbing along, because that's what we've done for the last 24, 25 years. And, we are that club that doesn't win anything because of how we act. We don't act like a club that wants to win something. And I think, I'm Ange In, and
I think the main thing is that, obviously Levy and that have his ways. I think Spurs fans aren't asking for like 100 million signings, because we see they don't work out, and they understand how Levy works. They understand he's a businessman and he wants to, keep the club above FFP. He wants to be able to, invest in other stuff and make the club money and make himself money, of course. I don't think people are asking, let's go and spend 50 million for the sake of it. I don't think people want that. People want us to be able to bring in, that 10 million, 20 million player who's going to serve as a backup squad depth. They can come in and do a decent job here and there. They're not, obviously superstars are gonna make the ceiling higher, but we're looking to raise the floor of the squad, and I think that's seriously what needs to be done. There needs to be more players. The floor needs to be raised, rather than the ceiling raising. Obviously that can be done down the line when there's UCL football and stuff like that. But I think if you genuinely just go on the squad list, look at Spurs' team, take out your bias and look at those players objectively, like Yves Bissouma and other players like that, they're no better, if not worse, than other teams which Spurs think, blimey, now we're below. We'll just listen now. Forest, top 4. Forest are up there, Bournemouth are up there, Fulham are up there, Newcastle are up there. They were literally getting relegated the other year. Brighton, Brentford.
Good Brighton, yeah.
Yeah, all of those teams have similar squads to Spurs, and they probably have more players and more rotation. So I think, he's got to be backed on a depth level. We've got Archie Gray at centre back, which I think is probably going to be really hindering his development, which I think it's very bad for him. The club has 4 centre backs if you include Davis, who was a backup in like 2015, so he shouldn't be really near it. Like, yeah, maybe a backup and a bit of a versatile guy who can step in Europa League and the cup games, but to have Dragons in as your 3rd centre back and then the drop off to be an 18-year-old centre mid, it's not good enough. And honestly, one thing that really blooming got on my nerves this week, Claude Littner, whatever your stupid name is, saying you're Daniel Levy's friend, and you're saying, oh, Daniel Levy's, he's a great businessman, he's done great stuff for the club, and he needs a manager who can win games. What has happened to the managers over the last 15, 20 years? Oh yeah, it's just another failure from the manager. You know what I mean? It's like 15 managers, and every manager's magically failed under Levy's ownership, despite him doing nothing wrong. It doesn't make sense. And if you look at it, he must understand that. I don't think he does. I don't think he realizes that. People are looking at him and thinking, you're not running the club in the same way that these other teams are. Liverpool were, when we were sort of, 9, 10, 11, after Liverpool sort of bottled the league and whatnot, they went through a complete rebuild, and they were terrible for a few years. They were like mid-table, finishing. And if you go back and look at the squads Klopp inherited, it was trash. And that's just the cycle of sports. You're going to go through rebuilds. They went from mid-table to winning the league and competing in everything against Man City, who are probably the best team that the league's ever seen in about 4 or 5 years. And the manager got back. They got the players that they wanted, and they recruited smart. Picking up people like Salah and Firmino and Mane. That's what happens when you back it. It doesn't take that long to rebuild if you have the right blocks in place, if you have the right recruitment. It's not a 20-year job. Spurs haven't won since however long the last league win was.
2008.
Yeah, that was the last cup, and the league win was probably like 50 whatever years ago.
63, I believe.
In back then, it doesn't take that long to rebuild, and there's no reason why Spurs with Levy, the amazing businessman that he is, the money he's generating with these Rolling Stones concerts and the F1 experience in the car park. There's no reason that the FFP is the same for every club. You know what I mean? It's not like Spurs being harshly dealt with by FFP and like have to abide to that particularly. They should be able to invest. They should be able to have a 25-player squad, which is what you're allowed. At least sort of 20 20 to 25 players who are good enough to play in the Prem and going to serve as good backup options. And it doesn't have that. All you have to do is look at the benches every week, see who he's got to bring on. Most of them, I think half the bench probably hasn't got a Premier League cap, and that's not their fault. They're just young players who have been thrown on the bench because of the injuries and lack of depth in the squad. So I think, it's very harsh on Ange, and I can understand, being a big six manager comes with a lot of pressure, a lot of media, people trying to stir it up. And I actually think he deals with the media really well. I think I really like his persona. I know he can look at the floor and say mate and stuff, which people get sort of annoyed about, but I think he deals with it well. It's got to be an impossible job. And I really want to sort of be in that position to have to deal to all these people without, criticizing the top of the club, which he probably internally knows he needs that back in, and he's not getting it.
I'll just quickly give my opinion, because I know that all of us want to get on to the next topic, which is highly anticipated. But I would say that for me, it would make no sense sacking Ange, because we'd just be back to square one again with every other manager. However, I can understand to a degree why others might not think that he's the man for us. I don't think it's a case of that he's a bad manager at all, because he's not a bad manager. But can see that when he's got everyone available and a fit team, he is a very good manager, and he can win games. But I understand people saying he might not be the man for us, because he needs a chairman that will actually back him with depth to combat the injuries of his style. Because his style does create a lot of injuries, as we've seen with all these hamstring issues. And if we did sack him, I could put money on it that he would go to another club and win things, because the chairman would actually, invest into his style of play and the way he wants things done. So I think if I ever do turn out wanting like Ange to be sacked, which I don't think I will, but I could understand what other people's thinking behind it, or is that he just isn't the right man.
I think for me, that the main thing for me, which would turn me from Ange In to Ange Out, would be if he lost the changing room. I support Torquay. Gary Johnson, picked us up in National League South, got us promoted. We got to the playoff final when COVID, lost on pens for promotion to League Two. His style of play sort of stopped to work, and in one of the seasons, he completely lost the changing room. You could tell, the fans were all, loads of people getting like banned from the stadium and stuff. You weren't allowed to criticize it on the Facebook without getting banned. It was like a dictatorship, and the club was in complete turmoil. No one liked the owner because he was trying to sell the stadium to buy houses, move us out of town and whatnot. And there was weeks where you go to the game and you'd watch the game and the players weren't playing for him. And it maybe been a bit less prominent last year. Spurs went into half time down a goal so many times and came back and rescued points in the second half. He's obviously got that motivation with him. There was something that he was doing to get Spurs back on track for the second half. He's obviously a motivational guy, and the players were playing for him. With Gary Johnson, the players didn't probably like him at this point. Torquay were looking to be promoted to League Two, had him on a long contract. Gary Johnson under too much, couldn't pay it off, I don't think, and I think that's the reason he stayed so long. The club became a complete catastrophe. We ended up getting relegated back to National League South. Johnson leaves as our owner, sells the club at the same time, and that's the situation you can get in when you sort of lose the changing room. So I think as long as the players are playing for him and believe in it and going out there and trying, I think that's all you can ask of them. If it becomes very clear and people speak out, or you can tell players' heads isn't in it anymore, I think that's when you've got to look for a change. Just no matter what the manager does, if the player's not rating it, like, you can't force them to do something. I think that would be the last straw for him.
Absolutely.
Well.
Yeah, honestly, it was a great explanation. I think after hearing what you'd said about why we shouldn't sack Ange, I can't see why anyone would want him sacked after that. But the next topic we're going to go on to is a new one, actually. So I'm not sure how this one will go, but
so I've made a little game for you guys. It's a bit of a Mickey take, but you'll see. Is it full screen for you?
Yeah. Yep.
So welcome to Tizzy's waiting room. So in this game, I'm going to give you two options. Essentially, there's going to be a true option and a false option, and it's going to be reports on Twitter, regarding Spurs' transfer window. So, just a disclaimer, this isn't having to go at any of the accounts that are sort of included within this, because they're just the messenger. I'm not trying to shoot the messenger. We see a lot of jokes flying around with Spurs, We'll get to the game. I'll start with an easy one, which you guys both know, and I'll give you 2 options. How do I go past? So the first option is THFC have lodged a concrete inquiry for club's forward player. Or there is a strong belief at THFC that a deal for player can be struck this January. So if you guys just want to, say 1 or 2, and we'll see if...
I think people should know that this is like a running inside joke in the Spurs community that every other club will be, Nottingham Forest have bid for this player, or they've had a bid accepted, but Spurs just... They fanny around, and this is the type of messages we get.
And the waiting room law as well. And I think, if you're a viewer watching along and let's see if you can beat these Twitter sort of gurus at, the stupid stuff that happens at Spurs. So
I'm going to go for THFC have lodged a concrete inquiry.
Yeah. And that is correct. With regarding Garnacho, it's been reported because Tottenham have lodged a concrete inquiry, whatever that means. So no bid, no nothing, just a concrete inquiry, whatever that may be. So you guys both got that one right, and it's 1-1. Question 2. Really riveting stuff here. Player interests THFC a lot this January. Or THFC are keenly observing the progress of young winger player. Obviously, I've taken out the player's name and club's names just because some of them you'd think, why would I have just randomly made up that player and whatnot? So
yeah.
Player interests THFC a lot, or THFC are keenly observing a player?
You go first this time, Kyle.
I think the true one is player interests THFC a lot.
That's what I was going to go for too.
This January.
And the answer is, you're correct. Paul O'Keefe, actually, with this piece of journalism that's saying Rando Kolo interests THFC a lot. Okay. Next. THFC hierarchy believes that striking a deal for player is written in the stars. That's the first option. The second option, player is ready to pack his bags immediately to join Tottenham.
No, I don't think anyone's ever said that. I'm going with the first one.
Yeah, the first one, 100%.
The answer is 2. According to Football Italia, David Tizzy is ready to pack his bags immediately to join Tottenham Hotspur. And you'll see a big if Spurs can find an agreement with Inter Milan. But that is some crazy report. No bid. Just if agreement, and apparently he's ready to pack his bags. Where is he? Next, THFC are closing in on signing centre back player name, or THFC are circling player with every Big Six club in contract talks.
Do you want to go? Jack?
No, you go first, but I'm just gonna go with whatever you don't to make it interesting.
I think I'm going to go for the left one. I think
I was gonna go for that one, but I'll go for the right one.
And the answer is THFC are circling Milan Skriniar.
No way.
Every Big Six club's in contract with his entourage. So yeah, no deals, no talks, no nothing, just circling him. That's how you get stuff done these days. Very proactive, maybe it's just working in silence, as they call it.
Just very quickly about Skriniar. I have no idea why we would actually go in for him, because he just seems like another profile in a Jaggers but older.
Apparently he's gone to Turkey today.
Oh, okay. Good.
So, and question 5, Jack, you've got 3 and Kyle, you've got 2. Kyle can equalise, or Jack, you can go ahead. Number 1, player has his heart set on a move to THFC this summer. Or player's entourage would love to see him in a Tottenham shirt.
Is this the last question?
This is the last one.
So Kyle has to go for what I don't go for.
Kyle, you go first.
Yeah. No, I'll let Jack go first, because
no, I have to go first, so I can just draw it, can't I? I would say I'd go for the left one, heart set.
Okay, I'll go for the right then, entourage.
And to complete the game, Ivan Toney had his heart set on a move to Tottenham, despite interest from other clubs. And it says the 28-year-old wants to join Ange Postecoglou'S squad. So Jack, well done. You went 4 for 5 there, Carl. You fluffed on the last ones. And I've got some other terms that I've seen been flying around. So amongst these, farcical reports, not hating on the accounts again. Spurs have been keeping tabs, considering, internally discussing long-term admirers, big fans monitoring. These are all things monitoring. These are all things that Spurs have been doing this year with transfers. And I think one thing you'll notice with all those players, none of them are currently at Tottenham.
Yeah, that was a great section. That was
very good. Yeah, I very much enjoyed that. I think that tees us into our final topic, which links to it a little bit. Our transfer window strategy. Are there any names that really stand out for the pair of you that you'd think would make a good fit at Spurs, or like a player that you think we need to get?
Yeah, I've got a few down. Actually recommended by Invert the Wing, and I went to go and investigate what he was recommending almost a year ago now, I think, is Mohamed Amura at Wolfsburg. 24 years old. He's an all-action forward, can play on either wing or up front. Just scored 2 goals on the weekend against Bayern, and he's got 8 goals and 6 assists so far this season. And from what I've seen from him, he looks like a really tricky player and someone that Spurs could really do with. And he ranks really high for pressures and take-ons and successive take-ons and progressive passes. And I don't think he'd be available. I think he would be available at a decent price of around 25 to 30 million, maybe more by the end of the season. But I think that's someone that Spurs can look for in the attacking third.
I think for me, I looked at the positions before sort of looking at the players. I think a 6 or a centre half is what is really calling out. I'll kind of list these orders 3, 2, 1, and I'll end on my sort of best one. Spurs obviously in the past have been linked with Giorgio Scalvini. Now I think he's one that he's a great ball playing defender. His numbers say it, and everyone speaks highly of him. But his blocks and sort of interceptions show that he reads the game well. He's a young guy who's obviously fit in the sort of transfer sort of policy of Tottenham at this current time, and he's a pretty tall guy and decent aerially. However, I went to a really interesting talk at Old Trafford with Ian Graham, who was sort of a chief analyst at Liverpool when they sort of won the league. He worked with Klopp and Brendan Rodgers, and before that he worked at Tottenham, and he did a talk basically saying that an important thing that a club can do is say no. And I think this is the one probably slightly positive I can take from Spurs this window, is that they haven't panic bought. They're obviously considering things, and monitoring things. Yeah, they're monitoring and considering, but at least it hasn't been a panic buy, because I think what he said, and this is, I'm going to sort of waffle on a little bit here, saying no is so important, because you don't want to panic buy and basically pick up negative sort of traits of a player that you just bought sort of for no reason. And one sort of thing that he did mention about working at Spurs, he wasn't the most positive about Levy. He didn't criticize him too much, but you could tell from the sort of vibes. He said that this is in sort of 2007 to 2012. Apparently, he said that Levy didn't really take advice from sort of the recruitment analytics team in terms of the numbers. A reason I'm talking about saying no and being and being patient is because in around 2008, the Spurs picked up David Bentley. I think it was around 22 million from Blackburn. He was a winger. He's a right winger. He liked to get down the line and cross it into the box. In the same year, in that window, Spurs sold Keane and Berbatov. So it's kind of just thinking like, well, what is the point? So there's a reason for every signing, which is why I think Drag's in. We should have said no. I think the first player I was looking at with Scalvini, he's had a big injury. We don't want to be adding another injury-prone player or someone who's struggling, maybe just coming back. So I think he's a definitely no. Even though he's probably going to go on, he'll be an international level player and he'll win stuff and be a great player. I think he's not one that Spurs should really sort of dip their feet into, because he could just come with the same issues with Spurs have currently got. Another one I looked at was Facundo Medina from Lyon. Again, I'll get onto a glaring, obviously, reason why this wouldn't happen. But I sort of made this before that reason occurred. He's a left-footed centre half. He's Argentinian. He's an elite ball playing centre back. His progressive carries and his progressive passes numbers and pass completion is extremely high for a centre half. He's very tenacious. He's not the biggest defender. In the air he's not the best, but he gets stuck in. Kind of like Romero-esque. He does get quite a few yellows, but he's only had one career red, and he's about 24 years old, I think, and he's had Champions League experience with Lyon, and he's got great pace from what I've seen. So I think as a Van de Ven sort of alternative, he could be really useful in that position. He's going to get stuck in. I think what we need, Archie Gray's obviously a young guy. He's not gonna absolutely go in and kill someone, even though Bergwijn does a little bit. I think Medina, maybe Romero can talk up him to come over to Tottenham. However, Lon obviously sold this week Kasanov to Man City, so I think that's a massive reason why it'd be difficult to get him off their hands, because selling one of your centre halves and selling your other one is not really going to happen in one window. So I think that's why Spurs would struggle. But I think he does look like a really good profile, especially for sort of like a Van der Ven alternative. He does look like a great guy. And my number one signing, which I'd love to see, which I'll get into sort of reasons and reasons not, is Jan-Paul van Hecke. I think he's absolutely elite. His numbers look elite, and Brighton obviously they will know how much he's worth because they look into the numbers, they know everything, and they will be able to see how much JP van Hecke can give to Brighton. His numbers, passing, everything is absolutely amazing. He's got Premier League experience. He's a good defender, and Brighton's style of play, I think that's one thing we've got to look at is positive. It's not like signing someone from Genoa or signing someone from Burnley back in the day where they're too fit. I think he'd fit in really well, and he's got the most progressive passes in the league. I'm not sure if it's among centre halves or just in general, probably both. And he's in the 98th percentile for a lot of sort of metrics. He's only on 30k a week, so I think that's where Spurs could maybe flex their muscles and say, look, we'll be able to give you this. And I think he's a great player, but the problem is he's played 86% of Brighton's minutes. They're always ahead of the curve, so I'm sure they've got a replacement lined up. But Igor, one of their other defenders, is out for the season, so it's one of those ones which is kind of it's kind of not fell into place quite right, because are they gonna let Igor's going to be out for the season? Are they going to let JP van Hecke walk mid-season? It could be for a big fee, which Spurs would probably have to pay. I think it's difficult, but honestly, JP van Hecke, his profile, his prowess, the way he plays, I think he would be the perfect Spurs signing at the back. Is it likely to happen? No, I think probably the most likely signing will make his Johnny Cardoso, which I've recently found out there's not actually an option in January, which is another great piece of recruitment from the club to insert a sort of a future clause, but it can't be activated in January, which is good. But I think JP van Hecke would be my dream sort of centre half signing.
Yeah, and echoing what Jake said, similar to JP van Hecke, I think the higher profile player above Van Hecke is probably someone like Piero Hincapié at Leverkusen, who can play obviously that centre back left back role, but I do think he'd probably be too expensive. And I think and I've actually got noted down he's got a similar profile to Van Hecke. I think their stats and percentiles are very close, and I
think Spurs fans have got to realise, and Spurs as a club have probably realised, because the mid-table is getting so good, there's less incentive for players to make that jump. Of course, Spurs might be able to offer them more money, in wages and whatnot. But realistically, if you think about it, Spurs would probably love to have like Dean Huijsen from Bournemouth or Zabiani or someone like that. Would they even make that move? Back in the day, clubs, the bigger teams would be able to, I know we bought Solanke last year, force them away. But I think players are going to start to realise, mid-table clubs can push for the top of the table with their projects, and they love the manager, they love the sort of smallness of the club, if you know what I mean. They're it's more tight knit rather than a massive thing. Spurs and teams like that, I think, are going to lose their pull to mid-table teams, where it's going to get to the point, it's going to be extremely difficult to get young good players off the other supposed mid-table teams, because they're outperforming Tottenham, and they might not think there's the reason to move. So I think it's a very difficult situation that Tottenham are getting themselves into, and it could result in them having to look elsewhere for signings, with more sort of Brighton-esque random signings from sort of non-top 5 leagues.
Yeah, I think the last few players I've got is another left back, centre back person that can do that role is Jorel Hato at Ajax, who looks like a very physical profile. I think he's more of a flying fullback, but I've seen him full in that centre half role. I think for some reason I think he just screams Man United, but
yeah, he does. I was thinking that.
Yeah, and the last few I've got is someone who I really like the look of and have actually admired for a while is Nico Paz, currently at Como, was at Real Madrid. I think he's only 20. He's just come back from an injury. Obviously, maybe we don't want to sign someone who's just been injured, but 4 goals, 4 assists so far. Can play in the midfield or off that right-hand side, and I think he's really positive. And I think the last one, I think Forest have actually bid for in the last few days, is Alex Baena at Villarreal.
Yes.
Left winger, 5 goals, 5 assists this season. And the clips I've seen of him is just so positive, so nimble, and I think he's someone Spurs could. If we are going to show some intent, maybe try and hijack. But why would you come to Spurs over Forest in this window? Honestly,
I want to add probably just two names to this list. The first one, a lot of clubs are now interested in him. When I made the thread, he was known, but there wasn't too much interest because it was outside the January window and in 2024. But Angelo Stiller from Stuttgart, I think Man United are interested in him along with the majority of top clubs in Europe because he attempts around 80 passes per game and completes 92% of them as a six. Makes 99 touches per 90, so he's very comfortable in possession, which is type of six that we would need.
Yeah. And he's 23 as well. He's not like a young kid, and I think Spurs need a player who's ready now. Ultimately, we've got to be realistic and think Spurs' transfer strategy over the last few years have been opportunistic, picking up players with release clauses, players going down. If players are out of favour, Stiller is going to be one where you're going to have to pay a lot. It's not going to be like you can fraud a loan with an obligation to buy or something like that. You're going to have to buy him outright, obviously with installments and whatever. But he's 23. I don't think Spurs will actually be able to compete with him if the other big boys are coming. But I'm not trying to sort of hijack your thing, but I think also Spurs have to look at in the six. Do they want that ball playing guy, or do they want a destroyer? Because at the moment it's goals conceded. It didn't start the season. Didn't start with a lot of goals conceded, but you don't want to have a team who gets walked over with a lot of young guys and a lot of sort of Spain-esque, ball playing players, which they sort of had in sort of the noughties and tens. So I think you've got to think of the profile. Do we want a passer, or do Spurs want a destroyer in there?
Yeah, I touched on that actually with Stiller. I found out that per game he averages just 0.5 challenges lost. So
lost,
for how many? Yeah, so which ranks him in one of the top percentiles of players in his position. So compared to how many tackles that he's winning and losing, it's a good sign. And I did touch on that he signed to Stuttgart from Hoffenheim for only in 2023. His market value is 30 million, but it will probably be over double that if we're being honest. He's one of Europe's hottest prospects at the moment at Stuttgart. And then another player I was thinking about, and then literally only the other day, I believe he signed a contract extension at Forest for another 4 years, and that was Murillo. Obviously left-footed, very comfortable on the ball when he does end up on the ball. Forest aren't a possession-based team. However, he has shown that when he has been pressed, he's very capable of, wriggling out of situations. He's got quite a weird build to him, quite a weird profile. He's not tall, he's not short, but he's quite stocky and quite flary, which, that Brazilian heritage almost. So that he's strong in the air as well. He only loses 0.9 of his aerials per 90. That ranks him in the top 14% of defenders in the Premier League. And he averages around 6 clearances per 90, which you would think that probably wouldn't happen as much if he was playing with a side who were on the ball more. But it does show that, when it comes down to it, that gritty defending, he is more than capable of doing it. He has just signed a new contract, but
I think centre-back is probably, to me, I'm not sure you guys agree, we can go around. I think it's the most important position because Archie Gray is losing a year of experience and development playing at centre-back. Dragons has obviously struggled. Van der Ven, we're just going to assume let's just assume he's not going to play again. He's going to come back and get injured again. You've just got to assume the worst. I just think a centre-back has to be near the top of the priorities just for Archie Gray's sake, because he can, maybe go back into the midfield. And I know that was a meme as well. He's done well in training, so they're not going to sign another 6 or another 8. But I think the frustrating thing with Tottenham is, with all the stupid stuff we've been talking about, they're going to be looking for a player on loan with an option to buy, possibly something like that. And one that I've noticed is Douglas Luiz. A lot of Villa fans were saying this is not a guy you want to play in the 6. Apparently he's not good there. Apparently he's more of a hybrid 6-8, which you could argue is less of what we need. But I think opportunistically, if Juventus are going to let him go on a loan and they're hoping for an obligation to buy, I think that's one that Spurs are probably internally discussing.
Paratici.
considering we a lot of players come from Italy, isn't it, for Spurs? And I think I won't be surprised if we saw a tweet come out that we're monitoring that situation.
Yeah,
sure.
I have got one more name as well that I had thought of, because we know that Daniel Levy loves a cheap fee or a free transfer. And to be fair, I could probably see this one happening, but I'm sure a lot of other clubs would be interested, and that would be Jonathan David from Lille. His contract runs out in the summer. And at the time of writing this, on the 22nd of December, in 86 league games, he had found the net 54 times and assisted 9 goals, which, to be fair, is a solid return. And it's one of them where he wouldn't be a ceiling raiser for the starting 11. I'd probably say that Solanke is the better player, but he'd definitely be a floor raiser for the rest of the squad to come off the bench or play in Europe.
I think that's a sensible one. I think that's a sensible one that Tottenham should and will be looking at. And obviously, it's been reported that they have been looking at it. So, like you said, I won't be surprised if that did happen.
Yeah, I don't normally like us going for the freebies or the cheap transfers, but that is one of the that is one of the only signings that I'd be pretty happy with if we did manage to secure on a free, because I'm sure that there'll be a lot of clubs that are also monitoring him and would like him at the side. I think United, although to be fair, United seem to be interested in absolutely everyone these days, but United hold interest, so we'll have to see.
100%.
But
does that conclude?
Yeah, I think it has 36 minutes overtime, but it's not too bad. But,
so I think the main conclusions are Everton outplayed Spurs, Ange in, and don't rush it, but sign some players.
Yeah, please.
100%. And we're all awaiting that Mikey Moore masterclass tomorrow. I can't wait. If we lose to Hoffenheim, that's really not.
It's going to be a good. It's going to be. It might have to be an emergency meeting. I can't lie.
Another one.
Another 2-hour emergency meeting. Yeah. But yeah, thanks for having me on, Kyle. That was really.
Thank you, Kyle, and
thank you guys.
See you guys soon.
Yeah. These are all the socials, and see you guys soon.